Hello, and welcome back to Parley, the show where you folks support the other stuff I make by paying me monthly to talk about the topic of your choice. This month, Lordrusty has begun a part two-parter. Their December and January Parley is going to be a double feature where I make the named hot drinks from the game Coffee Talk, namely these. The way I'm going to organize this is by doing this video mostly to plan. I'm hopefully going to get you to the point where you feel like you can make a lot of these, or the ones that interest you. It's pretty straightforward. As you can see, we kind of have 5 base ingredients. Coffee, and we'll get back to that. Tea, and the most of these, it seems to be black tea, but even that, we'll get back to that. Green tea, we'll get back to that. Choco powder, I'm going to recommend using something else, and then milk. I'll give some brief recommendations. I'm not going to get you through getting into coffee and having a bunch of different kinds of coffee available. I am going to briefly talk about that because I feel like it's significant. I'm going to use different coffees for some of these drinks. And if you have different coffees, I will recommend, like, I'll say what I'm going to use and why, sure. But it's not really necessary, sure. I just feel like it's useful to keep in mind, because there are so many different varieties of a lot of these things. When it says just coffee, what would be a good thing to do? There is no just coffee. So what kind of coffee would be a good thing to put in if they don't tell you what kind? I have some words about that. So we're going to look at ingredients. Now, it looks like a lot of drinks, but when you start getting into it, there's actually not very many ingredients here. It's pretty reasonable that you could get all these things, let alone get kind of the good version of a lot of these. You're going to see like cinnamon, for example. You should make a cinnamon syrup. If there was like 20 different spices, I would feel differently. But because there's really only a few that you would make a syrup out of, it's not that hard. It would get involved if you had to store like 10 of these or something, but you really don't for this list of drinks. So I think you should just make a syrup. It's really easy. I will describe how you might do that. I've got some visual aids for how you might get the concentrated coffee that I think you would want to use for a lot of these drinks. For example, we'll talk about all that. And then some of these drinks I can pretty easily review without us getting into them, or we might discuss a little bit like, what even is this drink? Like, what it says this, but what is that? I will give a judgment for myself, for my use, on like, what is this drink? When it says that, how are we going to do that? What are we deciding that is? And then we'll go from there. And then in January, this is at the beginning of December, at the end of January, I'll record another one. I'll have tried all of this stuff, because it's actually quite manageable to try all of this stuff, in my opinion anyway. And I will talk about it. I'll say what I thought about the ones that weren't something I'd already had, like a cappuccino. I'm just going to tell you in this video what I think about a cappuccino, okay? So that's the plan. That's what we're going to do. To begin, a brief discussion about coffee and tea for these drinks and the choco powder. So like some of these ingredients, it's not that self-explanatory. I'm going to explain what I would do for each of them, and hopefully gives you some suggestions for what you could do. The biggest sticking point, the biggest thing that you might have to go get some, maybe even equipment, I hate to say that, to do some of these, is probably the coffee category. If you don't have like concentrated taste, good tasting, like you think it tastes good coffee, these drinks mostly ask you for that thing. So let me explain what I mean. If you just make a cup of coffee with your coffee drip machine, or whatever you use to get coffee in the morning, or you go buy some coffee, you could go buy a shot of espresso, and I might end up recommending that to some extent. But it's got too much water for a lot of these drinks to taste the way that drink's experience is intended to taste. That's okay, but I do think that it's tastier if your coffee has less water in it, for these drinks. So for example, for a cappuccino, the game says coffee, coffee, milk, and for cafe latte, it says coffee, milk, milk. The ratios I'm going to provide for a cafe latte and a cappuccino are: the cafe latte is going to be 6 ounces of milk with 2 ounces of concentrated coffee. Would normally be espresso. We're going to talk about that in a sec. And the cappuccino, it would be, I would say, 4 ounces of milk to 2 ounces of coffee. So you could say that the cafe latte is a 1 part coffee to 3 parts milk. The cappuccino is 1 part coffee to 2 parts milk, you might say. You could then go further and say a cortado, 1 part coffee to 1 part milk. You could keep going. Some people might use different ratios for those, but that's how I would think of it. A cappuccino being more maybe dominated by the flavor of coffee compared to a cafe latte, even though the difference in the amount of milk isn't that big, yeah, that's reasonable. Like, I get why the game says coffee, milk for a cappuccino, but I'm going to make what I'm familiar with as a cappuccino. And I would recommend that you try that too, personally. But again, for those drinks, there's a lot of water in that limited amount of coffee, right? It's not like a splash of milk in your coffee. The drink is mostly milk, and then you want it to taste a lot like coffee. So you want coffee that has very little water. Maybe I'm over explaining that, but you get the point. Normally what you do is pull a shot of espresso, and let's not get worked up about exactly what the definition of a shot of espresso is. The point is, most people mean they're going to use an espresso machine using pressure to push hot water through a puck of coffee, and they're going to yield a very strong kind of coffee extract that people think of as espresso. Now, coffee normally is mostly water. It's still a predominantly water drink. And so espresso is still also kind of mostly water, but it certainly tastes more strongly of coffee. So it doesn't have to be extracted with pressure to be a concentrated coffee water. It doesn't need to be that thing. Espresso might give you different flavors, better flavors in my opinion, but it's not as if coffee at that concentration won't do the job if it isn't extracted under pressure. You can totally get it some other way. Let's suggest a few ways you could do that. Probably the most straightforward thing you would do is use an AeroPress. This guy, which I'm pushing the plunger through. A little kind of piston thingy made of BPA-free plastic that you can use to make coffee various ways. This is a pretty easy way to make something that is the right concentration for these drinks, even though it isn't extracted under pressure. The marketing for this kind of says it can make espresso, which kind of suggests that it can do the pressure thing, but it's not using significant pressure. Don't push really hard when you make coffee with this. That will make it taste bad. It will be very bitter. Don't do that. But you can use this pretty easily to make coffee of the concentration we're looking for. And the recipe I'm going to recommend for doing that is between 16 and 20 grams of coffee. 18 grams ground about like this. It's very difficult to communicate grind size in any way, let alone on camera. Can you hear the sound of this? Maybe. It's like, it doesn't feel like flour or powder. It feels like you can just still feel the individual pieces of coffee. If it helps, I have a Baratza Encore, and this is setting 20. So fairly coarse, I think a lot of people would say. But it's, yeah, you can see individual pieces, but it's not like big boulders. It's not big rocks of coffee. You could possibly go get your coffee pre-ground, although it will very quickly lose a lot of its potent flavor when you open it. You could have your cafe grind some coffee, although again, very quickly lose its flavor. They might grind you only a little bit. That could work. It would be great to grind it fresh. We're not going to get into that now, but I would recommend considering getting a coffee grinder if you drink coffee all the time. Anyway, 16 to 20 grams of coffee, ground like that, get it however you want. You'll take your AeroPress upside down. You'll put this on top. You're making a little chamber in here. That looks dirty, but I promise it's relatively clean. That's a pattern from the oils from the coffee that's brewed in it. This gives you a little chamber in which you can put in your coffee. So I would dump it in like so. And there it is in there, which you really can't see. But anyway, you saw it go in. And then you're going to put in 3 times that amount of water. So this was 20 grams of coffee. So I'm going to put in 3 times that amount of water. So 60 grams of water, boiling water. I'm going to stir it aggressively 20 times. I'm going to put the cap on. Now I chose to use a metal filter, but you could use 2 AeroPress filters. That'll be fine. I'm going to put the cap on like this. Push the air out. So we're bringing the plunger up to here so the water doesn't move around too much in there. Then it's going to get flipped onto your mug of choice. and you're gonna relatively forcefully press. In this case, it's fine to press a little forcefully. Stable glass like this is borosilicate glass, so it won't break too easily, or just the mug would be perfectly fine. And this will yield something that is, from an ingredient in a recipe for a drink's perspective, it will yield something that is equivalent to a shot of espresso. You don't need to worry about the extremely specific differences between those two things. That is, of course, totally fine. It is different. It does taste different. By itself, the thing you yielded will taste bad to most people. It can taste okay. In game, the description for espresso, they say coffee, 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 says blacker than a moonless night, hotter and more bitter than hell itself. And espresso can be very tasty and well balanced if you make a good espresso. The fact that they're giving you that description is a hint toward the next part of this discussion, which is what kind of coffee are they thinking you're going to use? Very developed, very roasted coffee, pretty obviously. And also apparently not very good coffee, because it could be very delicious if it was a balanced espresso. But it's still going to be very strong. A lot of the time espresso is a little too much for me, even when it is a beautiful espresso. So I don't personally enjoy that much. We'll come back to that espresso drink, by the way, because it kind of looks to me like an Americano, and I really like an Americano, so we'll talk about that. So you could do an AeroPress. You could go buy a shot of espresso. You could do that. There's this myth about a shot of espresso dying if it's not like put in fat that much. This is literally just fake. That's not a thing. Starbucks tells their employees that because it hides the fact that their espresso shots don't taste that good. A lot of people just don't like a shot of espresso plain. That's fine, but it's nothing bad happens to it if you leave it for 10 minutes, let's say. It's fine. You can still use it as an ingredient, right? So if you want to go to, I don't like Starbucks, they're obviously not sponsored, would never be sponsored. But sure, Starbucks, if you find a nice cafe and get them to make you a shot of espresso and you use it in these drinks, like, I think that's fine. A lot of cafes will probably make you most of these drinks if you ask them. So that's also an option for sure. There's another option, probably actually the most accessible for most people, which would be to use a pod. I don't like the idea of recommending you using like an Nespresso or Keurig kind of pod thing. There is Cometeer. That's something I have a lot of. These are aluminum capsules that you should recycle, by the way, that have inside of them a proprietarily brewed little puck of coffee. You might be thinking that size, what does that size remind me of? It is basically a frozen shot of espresso that has retained its flavor. It was flash frozen with nitrogen. That damages the organic compounds less, which makes it taste a lot better than if you froze some coffee, it would taste significantly worse. They're doing some stuff, mostly they're dumping nitrogen on it to make it frozen in a way that is tasty, and it is at a concentration that will work for these drinks. If you, again, have like a Keurig or an espresso machine, I don't really know that much about those machine settings, but they might be able to make you something that is basically an espresso, which, like, of course that would work if it's the right size of concentrated coffee. You might want to compare to make sure that's strong enough tasting coffee. But anyway, this is great. If you live in the US, you could consider getting a trial box of Cometeer. If you do, refer me so that I get credit. Message me on Discord and I get some free stuff if you do that. Not sponsored. I would get like a free cup if you did that. So sure, do that if you want to. I think Cometeer is pretty good tasting. I feel like if you have a good coffee setup, if you've tried really tasty coffee, this is like 80% of the way there. So you can also, I like this product because it lets you kind of trial if you care about that. Basically, you could dilute this to the strength of a normal cup of black coffee, and then you kind of know without buying all the equipment, would you care about the quality increase you would get if you invested in all that stuff? And then you can decide if you like that or not. By the end of your box of Cometeer, you think, yeah, it would be way cheaper if I just bought myself a grinder and did that myself. But I like that quality of black coffee. Quite sweet, really, really pretty. A lot of people's idea of what coffee tastes like literally just isn't what coffee tastes like at all. It's what kind of bad coffee tastes like. That's fine, but it'd be great if this is something you'd enjoy, if if you could enjoy it. So that's an option. If you're really excited about this kind of drink, I would highly recommend trying Cometeer or the AeroPress thing or get a grinder. That's awesome, but I don't want to try to sell you on that in one go, right? So that's an option. We're going to briefly talk about types of coffee. Not a lot to say here. It's pretty clear looking at these drinks that they are referring to very developed roast, dark roasted coffee with that big chocolate with some kind of carbonized, ashy flavor. Not necessarily bad, but that is a flavor note in heavily roasted coffee. The espresso that says blacker than a moonless light, hotter and more bitter than hell itself. Well, a lighter roasted espresso, a less developed roast espresso would have a lot of acid as well, not sourness, a lot of pretty kind of fruit acid, refreshing acid that is easy to recognize from that sour flavor of coffee if you've had both of them. Those are quite different. I could very easily remember the mentally scarring taste of sour coffee. It's really bad, but there is a kind of bright acidic flavor in coffee as well. And that's basically all I'm going to suggest in this section. For some of these, I think you clearly want like a more developed roast coffee. I broadly think that cafe latte, cappuccino, those category of drinks with a lighter roast of coffee kind of tastes like fruit milk, and I'm not the biggest fan. It's not disgusting, but it doesn't trigger my this is a delicious coffee drink thing in my brain. That's me. So I'm going to use a more developed roast for those, something that tastes like chocolate, basically. Not exactly like chocolate, but that has that tasting note. If you buy some coffee, you can kind of look at what the roaster says. Here I have the box for this thing of Cometeer. By the way, just to clarify one more time, not sponsored. I would be sponsored, by the way. I think this is a good product. Here you have, wait, let's go back here. Oh, but it's inverted this way. Anyway, here you can see it says that it's a light roast, which the problem with that is that's Cometeer saying it's a light roast. A lot of roasters have pretty unhelpful definitions of what light, medium, or dark roasts are. It's kind of like relative to their coffee, it's a light, medium, or dark roast. But there's plenty of places I've been where you buy a dark roast of coffee and you can see that white membrane in between the coffee bean that goes dark when you roast coffee even to medium. That is like kind of objectively not a dark roast of coffee. So that can be a little frustrating. Again, a good thing here is a lot of the time you can try their coffee. So if the roaster has a cafe, get one of their coffee drinks and ask them what coffee they used and then buy that coffee if it was the flavor profile you're looking for. No more discussion about a guide to buying coffee, but I do actually think that's the biggest hurdle here. Finding a way to get the concentration of coffee that would be a good ingredient for these drinks is 1/4 of the entire hour that this whole series will be. And I think that's appropriate because it really will take that amount of time. Find a way to do that. It might involve getting your own beans and grinder. If you make coffee or drink coffee every day, that is a very good financial and also I think personal investment. Grinding coffee smells amazing. That's great. But I don't mean to focus you on that. That's not the only option. I hope I gave you some ideas for something that will work for you. You could try to make really, really strong filter coffee, but if you have the setup to do that, you can do the AeroPress thing, and I would highly recommend that you do that instead. It's really going to taste better. Anyway, if you taste those espressos or whatever on their own and they taste terrible to you, don't freak out. This is totally normal. The flavor concentration is just a bit much. Put them in the drink. It will be tasty. Okay. The tea and green tea categories. Let's get into that. Not as much to say here, because making the tea is probably not going to be as much of an issue. Most of these, it looks to me like they are evoking normally brewed tea. They're evoking, you just need to brew some tea at a normal concentration. You don't have to do anything weird. Some of these drinks, like, again, I might have mentioned Tarik. I don't know how to pronounce this exactly, but of course I can look up what that recipe traditionally is, learn how to do it. It doesn't sound like it isn't very straightforward, so it's probably fine. And some of these, like a masala chai, you will be totally okay with, just brewing your black tea normally. You're going to need to get some black tea and some green tea. And for that green tea latte, that to me looks like a matcha latte. that looks very unmistakably like foamed milk, and they made matcha with green tea powder, and then they made a latte out of it. Basically a cappuccino, but instead of coffee, they used matcha, which sounds good. I have some matcha on hand. You can buy matcha powder. It's a little expensive. No offense at all to the green tea latte or matcha in general. You might want to skip that one. I feel like that, of all the drinks in this collection, that is the one drink where you would need to buy an ingredient only for that one drink. The rest of these, I don't think they're calling for anything but like normally brewed green tea. So, maybe don't do the green tea latte. But if you're interested in that, yeah, like it's a pretty distinct drink. A lot of matcha powder can upset some people's stomachs, so keep an eye out for that after you have it. But it's pretty tasty, pretty unique, pretty creamy. The matcha has this kind of white chocolate-esque mouth experience when it's in a latte like that. That's interesting. I like that kind of drink, so I'm going to make that. But if you were going to skip one, that seems like the odd one out, where you would need to buy an ingredient only for that one drink, as far as I can see. The rest of these seems actually for green tea pretty straightforward. We actually get Shin Genmaicha as a specific variety. Genmaicha includes some toasted brown rice in with the green tea. Traditionally, this was used as a way to stretch green tea further for people that didn't have as much money. But it is delicious and is often made as it's not intended to be a cheap product all the time nowadays. Genmaicha is very tasty when it's really good genmaicha. So that's pretty specific. You can go buy some genmaicha. Now this says that it has cinnamon in there. That's interesting. Is that a way for them to abstract the idea of putting the brown rice in? Now the description also says ginger. So I guess what I'm going to do is make genmaicha and put cinnamon and ginger in it. And we'll in a minute talk about how I'm going to put cinnamon and ginger in. But yeah, so that one's a little odd. It seems like it says it's just genmaicha, but there's other stuff in it. So yeah, whatever, that sounds good. Ginger and cinnamon in my genmaicha sounds tasty. Marrakech sounds like they're mixing green tea and mint. Green tea and mint is not a particularly alien combination. Like that's done. I will make a tea with green tea and mint. Easy, you know. So a lot of these are actually really straightforward. The green tea category can be really complex. Like that can be a very overwhelming category, but these are actually pleasantly surprisingly for me, pretty doable. Again, you might need to get specifically genmaicha for the genmaicha, but that's pretty easy. That's not going to break the bank. The matcha maybe kind of will break the bank. And then for the cough syrup, Marrakech, and the Grinch, I'm going to use some green tea I have on hand. I have a bunch of green tea, Yabukida, just a variety of green tea. Here I have a Mount Fuji Shincha from 2021. First flush. Ooh, this is a gift from a very close friend of mine, apparently cracked out for the good stuff. But I've got, 7 or 8 different green teas around. Again, just a quick note, because I feel bad for the green tea. There's a gigantic, beautiful variety of green tea. Green tea is not green tea is not green tea. That's not a thing. But I would assume that they're looking for, Yabukida, or there's another common. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about green tea, but you can look up varieties of green tea, and they will say a few that are kind of that classic green tea flavor, that Japanese green tea thing. Go for those. Is this meaningfully better than if you buy some random green tea from the grocery store? Yeah, I would say especially green tea. For black tea, personally, my opinion is it's really not that much better. I hate to say that. I have really good black tea. I'm gonna use really good black tea. But do you really need to not buy some, nice black tea from the grocery store? No, in my opinion. A lot of these drinks are, in my opinion, overpowered by their spices. But that might be kind of a hot take for some people that really like black tea. It'd be great if you went out and got some really nice black tea, but I don't think it's as big a deal as if you get it with green tea, you will have a very different experience, and I think that's worthwhile if you're interested in this. So Yeah, you could go source some interesting green tea. I have a list of tea sites you could look at somewhere. I should pull that up. I'll pull that up right now. Where you could shop for some tea if you're interested in that, which I hope you are. Tea sourcing sites, nice. Okay, sure. I'll put these in the names, which you should just be able to Google search, into the description of this parlay. There will be a list down there of like 8-ish vendors that you can go to and buy nice quality teas. I've bought from most of these myself quite a lot, especially bitterleaf and yunnan sourcing, and really enjoyed the tea from there. Mayleaf is another really common recommendation. I feel like some stuff on Mayleaf is really unhelpful, but they do have a big variety. It's fairly accessible. That's a good option. I have a Golden Bud box from Mayleaf, not sponsored, but I was given this as a gift, and I do like it. Like I'm not saying it's bad just because they didn't pay me to say that. So that's a good option. You can buy like a black tea and a green tea from there. You could just pick out a black tea from there, right? Like, again, they're not going to break the bank. The great thing I always like to say about tea is that better quality tea to some extent gives you more tea. That's not really a thing with coffee, of course, but if you get better quality tea leaves, they will yield more steeps of tea. You will get more tea out of them. Don't steep these leaves that you get from these sites and then get rid of them. You can go at least a few times, and if you brew them in a more concentrated style, you will get, maybe 7 to 10 steeps out of them a lot of the time. And Mayleaf, one nice thing about Mayleaf is they do have pretty involved brewing advice. So at the very least, looking there for some guidelines for how to brew that tea is useful. Anyway, very, very useful websites for reference, but you can go get some green tea and black tea. That's fine. The fact that they're not specifying indicates that they're looking for you to get something pretty stereotypical in that category. So I'm going to try to use something with a pretty, you might say, classic green tea or black tea flavor. What is that? I guess green tea is kind of that grassy, a little bit buttery flavor. A lot of the time a little astringent, or it sort of draws the water out of your mouth a little bit. If you're thinking of a kind of bitter, tannic flavor reminiscent of red wine, I would suggest that the green tea you've had was overbrewed and you should brew yours for less time to avoid that flavor. Same thing in black tea. If you're thinking of a kind of harsh, bitter flavor, like the thing people talk about in coffee to some extent, or again, it might remind you of red wine tannins, I am going to be blunt and say I think that is bad tea or coffee. That's not what those things taste like. That is an error in brewing those things. That's fine. They'll probably still taste good, actually, because you're putting sweetness in a lot of these, which brings us to our final topic. How are you going to put the spices and sweetness in them? But yeah, I would take care to brew them not too long. Experiment a tiny bit. You're going through the effort to make these drinks. Make yourself something nice. Once you learn how to do it once, you've kind of got that, right? You're improving the quality of drinks you make for yourself for the rest of your life. It's worth the effort. So anyway, this is not exactly going to be the most complicated experience. We'll begin making an ingredient list now, and I'll talk about, basically the final component is how you would add the sweetness to a lot of these. So let's do that. I've got an ingredient list thing open, and I'm going to make this for myself, for my use as we go through. So starting from the top, black lemon, coffee, lemon. It's coffee and lemon. Now in the picture, they've put a lemon zest into the coffee. Is that all we're doing? It says a perfect, if unlikely, combination of sour and bitter. So is there lemon juice in it? That sounds okay. I might use a light roast of coffee and try putting just a lemon twist in, and then maybe add a little bit of lemon juice, and we'll see how that is. So I'll say an acid for my acid forward coffee, a less developed roast coffee, a less roasted coffee, plus lemon twist. Try adding lemon juice. So lemon, basically. A lemon, or I'll just say lemons. And acidic, acid forward coffee. and I'll say roast forward coffee, which is what we're going to use for a lot of the other ones probably. The next one is Black Magic, coffee mint honey. Honey you could just put in. You could make a honey syrup to loosen it up, but for a lot of these drinks that doesn't seem necessary. That's useful in bartending to keep the honey flowing, but for a lot of these it's fine, so just some honey. There's lots of varieties of honey too, but clover honey is probably what I will use for a lot of these because I like it, and a lot of these drinks are going for a kind of floral feeling. There's a chocolate drink that has honey in it. We haven't talked about the chocolate thing yet. But that one I might consider using a darker honey. But probably a lot of these I'll use clover honey. Coffee mint honey, the mint. There's a couple things you could do here. Coffee is a liquid that you could steep mint leaves in. So you could make coffee and then make mint tea using the coffee, I suppose. You could also make a mint syrup. Now, we're going to have to look at the other mint drinks. What I'm hoping to do is for the drinks where it's worth it, you can just make a ginger syrup and a cinnamon syrup, and then you can use those to add that to all those drinks. But do you want sweetness in all those drinks? I feel like you do, but we'll have to look. That's basically the question on my mind. Is it going to be an inconvenience to combine the spice with a sweetener? And if not, then that would be a really convenient way to do it. You could use mint extract. I wouldn't do that, but I guess you could. It's supposedly not that good to drink too much of that, so I would be careful. Some fresh mint leaves and steeping them in the coffee is probably what I'll do for this. But anyway, I'll say mint leaves. Cafe latte. I guess I'll just talk about these as I go through. So again, basically 6 ounces of foamed milk, 2 ounces of very concentrated coffee. Sure, I don't mind a latte. Personally, to my palate, lattes have come to taste a little bit watered down with milk, but it can be very nice. To be completely honest with you, I order a cafe latte when I'm in a cafe where I don't think the coffee will taste good. Because if the coffee doesn't taste good, but it's got that much milk to kind of meter its bitterness, the drink still tastes pretty okay. A lot of places a latte is assumed to be sweetened, but there's really no need for that, especially with this amount of milk. Like, milk contains plenty of sugar. If you like it that way, that's fine, but it's definitely worth considering that its own drink. A cappuccino, on the other hand, usually a pretty safe bet to not overwhelm someone who likes the taste of coffee that tastes good. It's still got a lot of milk. This is what I order a lot of the time when I go to coffee places that I like. I order this or a cortado, which is, again, kind of a notch down. You could think of it as these drinks, you add your espresso, and then a cortado, you add that much milk. Cappuccino, you add that much milk again. Cafe latte, you add that much milk again. And you could foam it or not. Usually it's foamy. Yeah, so a cappuccino, again, not too much to say, but what I normally enjoy. A good sized drink a lot of the time. Can be pretty cozy. A lot of places have a nice mug for their cappuccino. That's very nice. In here, in this one, you can see that they've put some latte art on it, which is pleasant. The espresso. Now, it's just because these all have the same cup size, I guess, but if it was the same size, that kind of looks to me like an Americano. So like with the cortado, cappuccino, cafe latte ladder, starting with a shot of espresso or concentrated coffee, where you might have added 3 times that amount of milk to make a cafe latte. An Americano, you might add 3 times that much water to arrive at an Americano, something that is basically the strength of a filter coffee that wasn't made concentrated in the first place with like a drip machine or something, but you made it using that concentrated coffee flavor profile. So it'll taste a bit different, but it's still the strength of as if it was a filter coffee. I often really like that. It often creates this, I would describe it as a little bit like marshmallowy or slightly creamy, kind of toasted marshmallowy flavor. A lot of places use at least a somewhat developed roast for their espresso. So you get that big, bold coffee roasted flavor profile from coffee. But I find that brewing it concentrated kind of slices off a bit of that harshness. So you get to really enjoy the flavor of very roasted coffee with less of the harsh bitterness that you eventually get if you roast coffee dark enough. So that's why I like an Americano. When I want like dark roasted flavored coffee, but I want to just drink a black coffee, I usually do it that way. I would brew it in my AeroPress, concentrate it, and then dilute it, or I would order an Americano from a place. Some places that I go to will make you a filter coffee, and I generally do that if they have a lighter roasted coffee, because I like how that tastes by itself. Gingerbread coffee, coffee, ginger, cinnamon. So this one, to me, it feels like you make coffee and then add, it looks like they have whipped cream, and this is ginger and cinnamon. So black coffee, ginger syrup, cinnamon syrup, and then it says sweetened with brown sugar. I guess I could just use that in my ginger and cinnamon syrups, but do you want that for all these drinks, right? So let's address the elephant in the room. You could obviously use powdered ginger and powdered cinnamon. Why don't I want to do that? I don't think it tastes as good. I actually think powdered ginger is all right. Some people hate powdered ginger. I don't know. But I think that it's a nice ginger flavor. And powdered cinnamon is good too. A lot of people, they have really old spices, so they don't really taste like anything. Yeah, don't do that. But I don't. Like, I have ginger and cinnamon I like the taste of and use all the time. I just feel like for a lot of these drinks, it would be nicer if there wasn't the powder in the drink. If you steep pieces of ginger or pieces of cinnamon stick in a sugar syrup that you make on the stove, you just take equal parts sugar and water, heat it, that'll dissolve the sugar. Don't boil it, just heat it. That will let all the sugar dissolve. It'll look like it won't, but if you stir it and you're patient, it doesn't even take that long. And then you just steep as if a tea your piece of cinnamon stick or your ginger slices or whatever. You can make a super bold flavored, very clear, very clean syrup out of those ingredients. I guess we're going to have to go through all of them to see, is that suitable for all the drinks that are asking for that ingredient? I'm not really sure yet. So I guess we'll put a pin in this one. Ginger latte. I think that these kinds of drinks that are evoking, it's like a cafe latte, but they put some syrup in it. Very Starbucksy kind of thing in my experience. Very tasty. I think it's nice to have the syrup for that kind of drink. So yeah, sure, that's 1 point in the syrup category. Gingerbread coffee, that's going to be a point in the I don't know category. It sounds very tasty. Black coffee with ginger and cinnamon syrup and then whipped cream on top sounds good. I don't know. It's certainly sweetened, so that's a good cue, right? Jahe Tubrik, I'm gonna have to learn how to pronounce that. This is probably a drink I can look up the traditional recipe for. Ginger presides over the ground coffee at the bottom of the cup, originally from Indonesia. Kind of looks like there's pieces of ginger floating in the coffee. So this feels like a black magic situation where you make coffee and then use the coffee to steep ginger. Maybe it says at the bottom of the cup, but it's on the top of the cup. I don't know what's going on there, so I'll look that one up. Needless to say, ginger, cinnamon, and I'm gonna say whole ginger. I already have powdered ginger, but you might want to add that too. And I'll say whole cinnamon sticks. What kind of cinnamon are we using here? Cassia cinnamon, like Karinji cinnamon, Saigon cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon. I have all of them, so maybe I'll just do a mix. I really like a mix in most things, but the Ceylon cinnamon is Ceylon is a bit more, I guess, bitter in a positive way, like earthy. It has more a complexity of flavor, in my opinion, but it isn't as sweet. It isn't as fiery as well. I like mixing them, so I'll probably do that for a lot of these. Okay, sugar and spice, coffee, honey, cinnamon. Doesn't seem to be anything we don't already have. So again, you could totally do cinnamon syrup. If you're already putting honey in, I feel like we're getting to the point where I would consider not making a cinnamon syrup. Anyway, let's keep going. Tea, milk, ginger. Yep, again, sounds like ginger syrup is good. Tea, ginger, cinnamon. Sounds to me like a lot of people put sugar in their masala chai. But I kind of like it without too. I have a bit more experience with this drink. You can also see, I think in the art, I think that's a star anise there in the cup. There's a little spice floating in the cup. I think that's a star anise, which I have. So I'll add star anise to the list. Fairly easy to come by as a whole spice, and whole spices keep a really long time. Star anise can be useful in lots of recipes. You can put it in, for example, a soup or a lot of desserts. If there's like a liquid component, you could get some star anise steeping in there. You could even leave like batter for a lot of eggnog, maybe. I haven't tried that, but something like a brownie batter or something, you could leave spices in it overnight and then take them out, and they should infuse some flavor. That could be a thing to do. I don't know if there's any stage at which your baked good is warm. You could add some star anise. I guess for a lot of people, star anise might be a bit limited in its usefulness, but it is useful in lots of cooking. You would just have to make those things. I don't know. Maybe don't go out and get a star anise just for that, but I have it, so I'm going to use it. Midsummer Night's Dream Tea Lemon Honey. Very straightforward, nothing we haven't seen before. Again, I'm not talking about a lot of these drinks yet because I haven't had them. Masala chai, I'll talk about what I made in my experience. I might make a sweet and unsweet version. I probably will make a sweet and unsweet version. Russian tea, tea, lemon, cinnamon. Is it traditionally sweetened? It says it's a totally American drink, hinting that I can probably look up if this is normally sweetened. Cinnamon syrup. I'm totally making a cinnamon syrup, a ginger syrup, and also having powdered ginger and powdered cinnamon. I guess that's what I'm gonna do. Do you really need to go into all that? No, but I don't know. For a lot of these, you'd want one or the other. Chai Adeni, probably not pronouncing that correctly. A sweet spicy chai latte from the town of Aden, Yemen. Ooh, a Yemenese drink. Cool. Tea, milk, cinnamon. Yeah, so it says sweet, so probably I can use cinnamon syrup. And then the Tarik TT milk, I'm going to have to look up exactly what would go in. We're going a lot faster now because we've covered most of the things. Green tea, lemon, honey, easy money. We talked about the green tea latte already. Green tea, mint. Again, I'll just steep fresh mint leaves with my green tea. I think that the taste of fresh mint tea and dried mint tea is pretty different. Obviously, there's different varieties of mint too. But I love fresh mint tasting tea. I'm going to suggest trying fresh mint leaves for this, but I'm curious if this is normally made with fresh mint. It sounds like it is. They even say fresh and healthy, so I'll look it up. Genmaicha, but then they're adding cinnamon and ginger. So, okay. Is it sweetened? No. I might try both ways for that one. The Grinch, green tea, ginger, cinnamon, but just not with genmaicha. What are you doing here? Maybe this is the sweetened one. This one has a candy cane sticking out of it, which is probably just an asset for the game to differentiate from the other drinks. I don't think I'm going to put a candy cane in mine. Okay. Chocolate. We finally arrived at the chocolate part. If you take solid chocolate you like to eat, like a chocolate bar you like to eat, that you would like the flavor profile of in these drinks, you like this solid chocolate bar, you are eating this solid chocolate bar. Take about 4 parts of that solid chocolate and 1 part cold water and put it in a glass or a mug or something. Microwave it for like 15 to 30 seconds. Be careful, watch it, check frequently. And then it won't be dissolved, it'll just be warm. Stir it aggressively, and it will look like a mess at first, but then become a beautiful, perfect chocolate sauce before your eyes. For a lot of these, I'm interested in doing that, especially if it has milk. That works very well. You mix that into the warm milk, warm up your milk as well in the microwave or something, or on the stovetop, and mix in that chocolate sauce. Perfect. For some of these, is it going to be perfect? Okay, chocolate, ginger, cinnamon. It's also called bitter heart. So no sweetness. Again, I feel like this category is evoking hot chocolate, like made with hot chocolate mix, like hot chocolate powder, which is actually surprisingly complicated. Hot chocolate powder usually has very fine sugar, like powdered sugar, but powdered sugar also contains a little bit of cornstarch usually to keep it from clumping. You get cocoa powder, usually powdered milk. Malted milk powder tastes pretty good in drinks like that. Yeah, for a lot of these, it kind of sounds like they're doing a hot chocolate thing. I can't believe there isn't a mocha on this list. That's surprising, but I guess it would mix categories, which this isn't doing so far. Maybe there is a mocha in the game. I don't know. Is this every drink from the game? Maybe there are more. Anyway, So I don't know for these, I guess get hot chocolate mix and then get some chocolate you like to eat. And we'll have those both as an option. I'll say hot chocolate mix. You could make your own. I've tried to do that. Exactly how you incorporate the sugar is a little weirdly finicky to get it to dissolve really quickly without there being too much cornstarch on it. And that kind of cakes up your drink otherwise. But yeah, malted milk powder is really good in this kind of drink. That kind of sounds unsweetened, that first one. And then we have chocobi miruku, I think. Clearly sweet. Again, chocolate honey milk, easy. Probably that one I will make the chocolate sauce thing I described with milk and then add honey. Pretty straightforward. For a lot of these, I'm probably going to use like moderately dark chocolate. It seems like they're either intended to be bitter a little bit, like delicious bitter dark chocolate. I like that. Or they're going to have sweetener in them anyway, and then that's a nice flavor pairing. I also think that honey pairs better with darker chocolate, personally. Okay, lots of different varieties of chocolate, too. We just don't have time. Dark chocolate, chocolate. What do you want from me here? Maybe chocolate sauce in the hot cocoa mix? Huh? Maybe we're doing that. That could be good. That would get you a drink that had layers of chocolatey flavor without it being ridiculously rich, which will make most people sick, speaking from my own experience. Spanish Sahara, it says warm and cozy just like a day in Barcelona. That sounds lovely. Ginger syrup seems appropriate in that one. That sounds good. That's maybe I'm looking forward to the most out of a lot of these. And then the Spiced Lady. Yes, I've had this drink in England. But I'm not really familiar with the exact recipe. Again, sounds like cinnamon syrup would work fine, probably. And these chocolate milk and ginger ones, it really seems like that chocolate sauce is a great fit. So yeah, I guess hot cocoa mix too for bitter heart and dark chocolate. Bitter heart, I think I'm doing hot cocoa mix and then just some ginger and cinnamon. Or maybe I'll steep them in the hot cocoa like that thing in Black Magic. I'm really coming out hard against powdered spices. Okay, we're almost done. Bedchamber, these are the milk ones. Not a lot to say about most of these. It seems like they are okay with the sweetness. Milk, cinnamon, honey, checks out. Lemmenthal, yes. Milk, mint, and lemon. Interesting, okay. The exact proportions, getting the milk not to curdle, it's probably fine. You could just infuse it with lemon peel. I might try doing that. Get hot milk and steep lemon zest or lemon peel and mint leaves in the hot milk. That's probably what I'll do. I'll try. Milk, honey, lemon. Maybe the same thing. Maybe I'll put a little lemon in it. Maybe I'm too worried about the milk curdling. I don't actually know that much about that. Milk, honey, mint. Okay, easy. I might mint syrup hasn't really come up enough for that to be worth it, so I guess I won't do that. And then STMJ, warm booster made of susu, milk, telur, egg, madu, honey, and jahe ginger from Indonesia. I probably butchered some of those, but it sounds like this one is quite different. It reminds me of a flip a little bit, where you put beer and milk and egg together, or you make a kind of like instant hot boozy milkshake thing. So yeah, this one has egg in it. I might make a sort of custard, like, you know what this sounds like is French toast batter, or like French toast custard that you'd use to make French toast. Make it, leave it overnight. The flavor improves a lot. And yeah, with milk, egg, honey, ginger, this is basically a drink version of what you would use to make French toast. This is what it sounds like to me. So I'll look it up, but I'm probably going to make something inspired by that. That sounds good if it can be made to be the proportions that you'd want for it to be a tasty drink. And then I would imagine that you're going to want to gently warm it on the stove as well. Interesting. That one seems a little bit tricky, but I guess the base is to make a latte-like thing sweetened with honey and maybe the ginger syrup or maybe just pieces of ginger, and then incorporate egg as if a custard. Okay, so that seems doable. That's probably the most involved one on here, actually. That's the one that I feel like there's the least obvious thing to do of all of them. That's the only one that I'm not really sure what you should do for it. But for the rest of them, I have ideas anyway. That's what we're going to do. This ended up being way longer, but there's a lot to cover. We have talked about how you might make all of these. You've got kind of a list of things to get or ideas for things to get if you want to make some or all of them. Yeah, I hope that you'll make some of them with us. And then in maybe 2 months, I'll talk to you all again and I'll have tried all of these and I'll just give you that video. I'll just give you my notes on all of them. If any of them is really interesting or I have a lot to say, I'll bring it with me. Cool. Looking forward to part 2.